fire burning right in the jazz that I representing for comes audience. We got Kidaki, Buxton Massive. Hey Babylon boy, I go like you like son. Red.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Gaddafi Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge from the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge from the front line. We go again, we rise up early morning watching Comes TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruption over land and sea, where the wicked politicians they try to trick you. Guyana is a land for everybody, with 6 races should live in harmony. There's one set of people getting aisle money. There's one set of people doing the thievery. Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, this is a program that you all can see. Sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, with Jah as ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, fooling the people to promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. Stop fooling people. You're promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. I say, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, we got Frankfurt, Bork and Mark Benchcop. David Hines and Gaddafi Amsterdam. Gerald Duncan, Nigel London. Normal Brown and Gavin Matthews. Big up Pastor, poor people governor. Simona Brooms, Robin Simpson. Hampton Green and Winston Jordan. And yes, we can go right on and on. Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again.
The relatives and friends of young Brendan Bacchus, they deserve justice. The family, relatives and friends of our in Boston, they deserve justice. The family, relatives and friends of Peter Henley, they deserve justice.
And so when we say that Guyana is an apartheid state, we have the evidence to show.
morning, morning, liver, morning, morning, liver, morning, morning, you can keep your conniving morning. When you be not for a bone, you have it every morning. Now because you money done, you come with conniving morning. When you had your pocket full, you have it every morning. Now because you money done, you hustle for every morning. Yes, morning, neighbor, morning, neighbor, morning, morning, neighbor, morning, morning, I don't want you conniving morning. Neighbor, neighbor, joker, neighbor, neighbor, joker, neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me walk from. A 2 pound note and a killer piece. A 2 pound note and a killer piece. A 2 pound note and a killer piece. This is all the money that me walk from. Money, neighbor, money, money, neighbor, money, money. I don't want you conniving money. Oh, Joseph.
The People's National Congress Reform invite you to.
Hey fans, it's karaoke and oldies night this and every Thursday at Club Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton. Dance to the magical songs of yesteryear by popular DJs and Camps Audio. Admission is free. Come out, let's make memories at Club Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton North.
Comes out your son. You burn the swine when I want you shine. The tree of life, them I want you climb, cause them art not kind. Comes, I say them art not kind. Buxton Massive, Kidaki, Red Hat.
You can get meat anywhere, but for the best cuts of chicken, beef, pork, mutton, and lots more, check out T&W Harris Butcher Shop, located in the East Rheinveld Market Meat Section. Call us on 609-7168, 641-4494. Ask for Rastaman. T&W Harris Butcher Shop for the best in fresh cut meats and lots more.
like contention. Morning, are you morning? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is 7 hours 29 on the 3rd day of April in the year 2024. Welcome to the program. I am your host, Kiraki Amsterdam. It's Wednesday morning. It's when we have the professor in the house, and the professor and I, we are going to be talking about some things, all kinds of things. I'll be asking him for some clarity this morning on something that I said yesterday. Right, so we'll talk. Lots of things to talk. How was your last night? How was it yesterday? How you spent your yesterday? What you did yesterday? Y'all talk to me. Made some money? Yesterday was what? The first day back at work after a long weekend, or what we can consider a long weekend after the Easter weekend. How did you manage? Has anything changed? Okay, I wish you the best. I wish you success. I hope you achieve those set goals for the rest of the week. It's Wednesday, like I said. Before I talk with Dr. Hinds, let me quickly comment on some comments that I saw this morning. Carrie Perry, is that the name I saw? Carrie Perry. I like when I really like when, as Bob Marley said, me throw my car in a car and fall. When I throw my car and then fowls start coming out of the nest. They respond and peck at my corns. I love that. Right? It means that people are listening, people are paying attention. Right? So Carrie Perry came to tell us that Wong was entertained by the Gomeses. We're talking prison escape. Wong was entertained by the Gomeses because he approached them for food and water and so on, and even take a shot or two or three or four with David Gomes, I think is the guy's name. This son. Right? And so that would have given the youngster adequate time to recognize who was sitting with his father.
No argument, none whatsoever. A man was sitting with my father or my grandparents, my parents, who were my father. I could recognize the man. He sat on there long enough and eat and drink long enough for I recognize him. And the question is, how was the identification made? What did this youngster know about SKP Wong before he saw him eating and drinking with his father and grandmother and so on? Right? How was that identification made? You see me, I have an inquisitive mind. I like to be inquisitive. And so I didn't just talk about that issue as a reference and went and stepped. I went back to the news. The youngster reported that the person, the assailant or the murderer of his father and grandmother was also chopped by his father. When the Guyana police force was reported that he murdered Wong, killed Wong in exchange, Wong attacked them with a cutlass. One might assume it's the same cutlass. He's a good cutlass wielder. Like them Chinese, he's good with his blade. So he attacked and armed the battalion with a cutlass, and he was killed. Did they report seeing any evidence that he was chopped? I can't recall seeing or hearing any of that in the news. You see, these are things which will confirm or reject certain propositions, right? I'm not saying that he hadn't a chop mark on his skin, but I'm saying it wasn't reported. And so in order for us to close this case, I think there are lots of loopholes still left. And so the case can't necessarily be closed, at least not in the eyes of the public or in inquisitive minds, right? Good. Perry tells us that the Gomeses were relatives to Nisselman. Perry must know what Perry is saying. Good? I've said what I've said. I rest my case. Good? Dr. Hines, welcome to the program. How you do? You're muted apparently.
I'm muted.
I think I heard you there. Let me say something.
Good morning.
Yeah, that's good now.
Oh, okay.
Good. Welcome to the program, like I said. How you been keeping? What's happening?
Well, doing God's work, doing the people's work.
One might ask, what is God's work versus the people's work?
Well, they're the same. They're the same. They're the same. They're the same.
Okay. So when you're not doing the people's work, you're doing whose work? The devil.
Always with the people's work. And, you know, I believe in the philosophy, you know, you're alive and dead at the same time. From the day you're born, you start to die.
Very well.
From the day you're born, you start to die. So
yeah, I usually say what is certain is death. We are going dead, regardless of what we do.
That is a process, you know. You live to be 70 years. You start to die
after. Anyways, all right. So yesterday I was talking with the viewers, and I took the position that whichever political party, let's start with the leadership race in the PNC, whoever, regardless of who wins the leadership race, there's still going to be somebody's puppet. Likewise, nationally, whoever wins the election, regardless of who wins the national elections, there's still going to be somebody's puppet. Good? Because of the international hand that is usually involved in regime change and all of that, and supporting government and so on. The invisible hand, let me call it that. So I would want you to, that's my theory, that's my hypothesis, if you want to call it that. I'd want you to address that from a geopolitical point of view, so that you know you can add or subtract from what I'm thinking or what I'm sharing with the viewers. Good. But before we go there quickly, yesterday I said, because the question was asked. In fact, that statement was made like 2 days ago, and the question was asked immediately after. So will WPA be a puppet government, or will WPA join a puppet government following the next election or future elections and so on? And so yesterday I went quickly into the history of what I consider the history of political parties in terms of how they were formed and so on. And my position is, I don't know that the WPA came out of any encouragement from foreign players in terms of getting it started. I said, for example, in the time of Forbes, we know that the CIA, the US government and so on was in Forbes' corner because of the Cold War, etc., etc. Then we had Cartu came and did this thing for the PPP and so on. But in relation to the WPA came out of a number of groups, IPRA, Raccoon, ASPRI, and so on. So I deem them a number of social groups, pressure groups perhaps. And my conclusion was the WPA was not really a political party in its early days, but more like a pressure group. Clarify that for me, add meaning to that, if I'm right or wrong.
Well, it was a pressure group between 1974 and 1979. It became a political party on July 27, 1979.
Very well. And it contested the first election?
1985.
Good. All right. So if Dennis Morning, right? Because I had a further conversation with Denise. She was surprised when I said that. She was saying if WPA was not interested in, wasn't a political party or interested in what I might say government, how is it they were so strong, I want to say anti-PNC, anti-Forbes before that 1980 period? Was there any interest in political power, or it was just social justice?
All political parties are interested in political power.
No, but it wasn't a political party until 1979. But prior to
yes. Prior to, between 74 and 79, it was a pressure group. That doesn't mean it wasn't interested in power.
Okay, good. So Dennis, you got your answer there. Right, so let's talk about that puppetry in government, as I mentioned. Or the geopolitical influence in the formation of these governments, more specifically in Ghana. We know it happens around the world, but let's talk there.
Well, I think you're raising a number of concepts there. You're raising geopolitical influence, and I think you're concluding that once there is geopolitical influence, then the government that comes out of that process is bound to be a puppet government. I think that's the gist of your argument. And you're right, but yet you're also wrong. Right? A puppet government is a government which has the outward symbols of authority and power, but it is directed and controlled by another power. Let me repeat that definition. A government that has all the symbols of authority and power of its own, but it is directed and controlled by another power. That is the definition we use in political science to define a puppet government. So I think we have to make a distinction between geopolitical influence and a puppet government. I don't think there was ever a puppet government in Guyana. Perhaps the one that may come closest is the present one, but even the present one, we have to be very careful. I heard you on the Burnham thing, let me say up front, Burnham was not a puppet of anybody. It was very difficult to make Burnham into a puppet. Burnham had a keen sense of power, and Burnham negotiated his way during the Cold War. Yes, Burnham came to power. Burnham and the PNC came to power in the Cold War because the US did not want the PPP, because the PPP was communist. And so the PPP went, the Americans went with what they saw as the lesser of two evils, because Burnham was socialist. He didn't call himself a communist. He was a socialist, and so they made a choice between two devils, if you will, and they chose the lesser of two evils, Burnham as a socialist, as opposed to Jagan, the communist. Jagan would have become a puppet of the Soviet Union if he had gotten power, because the Soviet Union would have been interested in making him a puppet. So the theory goes. But one has to be careful. Cuba was a client state of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union propped up Cuba economically, militarily, etc. But Castro didn't talk to them for about 5 years. After they removed the missiles from Cuba, the Americans, the Russians, the Soviets had placed missiles in Cuba, pointing to the United States. The United States didn't know, they found out, and there was what we call the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's the closest the world came to a nuclear war. In the end, they settled it with the Soviets removing the missiles from Cuba and the Americans removing some missiles they had in Turkey. Castro was angry that the missiles were in his country and he was not at the table when the decisions were made to remove the missiles. And he didn't talk to the Soviets for about 5 to 7 years. I'm making the point there that it's hard for people like Castro to be a puppet. They're too strong. They're strong personalities. They have a sense of their own power. Influence, were the Soviets influencing Cuba? Yes. Were the Americans and the West influencing the early Burnham regime? Yes. But I would argue Burnham was not a puppet. How do I know that? By 1974, Burnham declares himself a Marxist-Leninist. He goes to Soviet Union and gets the highest award from the Soviet Union. So in the end, Burnham was playing the Soviets against the Americans and vice versa. That don't sound to me like a puppet. Right? So yes, the Americans were instrumental in Burnham coming to power. They would have exercised some influence in the government, but a lot of Burnham's policies were then anti-US. Burnham nationalized bauxite in 1971. The US were against nationalization. Burnham nationalized sugar. Burnham nationalized bookers, nationalized the radio stations. The Americans didn't like nationalization. That for them was communism. So Burnham went against the Americans. No, I do not think Burnham and the PNC were puppets. It's very hard. The men and women of that generation were nationalists. Were they influenced by external forces? You bet they were. Did external forces play a role in them coming to power? Yes, you bet. Did geopolitics influence how they governed? Yes. Were they puppet? No. Again, the definition of a puppet government is a government which is endowed with the symbols of authority, outward symbols of authority, but in whose direction and control are exercised by another power. One could argue that indirectly, the Americans always influence governments in its so-called backyard. One could argue that the Soviet Union influenced the government in the Soviet bloc, in Eastern Europe, Cuba, and so on. There's no doubt about that. You cannot deny the influence. Did it reach to the point of puppetry, where lock, stock, and barrel they were carrying out the wishes of the external force? And I've shown you where Burnham did not carry out the wishes of the Americans on every issue. He nationalized, he opened diplomatic relations with China, for example. He opened diplomatic relations with the Soviets, very close to Cuba. That doesn't sound to me like a puppet of the United States. Because the United States, if they were exercising total power over the Burnham government, Burnham could not have moved in those directions. So you're right. Burnham and all governments in Guyana and the Caribbean were influenced by the Americans. Were they puppet of the Americans? No. The closest puppet of the Americans that we had in the Caribbean would have been the Seaga government, which took power in 1980 from Michael Manley. Michael Manley, liberal Democrat, came to power, and he bucked the U.S. Wishes. He also moved towards nationalization. He also imposed a levy on the bauxite, and the Americans sent the Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, to tell Manley, we don't like what you're doing. Manley opened diplomatic relations very close to Cuba. He was not that close to the Soviet Union. He was very close to Cuba. And when Daniel Ortega came to power in Nicaragua, and Maurice Bishop came to power in Grenada, Manley was seen in the company of Ortega and Bishop going to a non-aligned conference. So Manley could hardly be seen as a puppet, although he was a liberal Democrat. He wasn't a Marxist and communist, and he was a quote-unquote democratic socialist. And the Americans, of course, removed him via regime change, using the election as regime change in 1980. Seaga comes to power as a clear client of the Americans. And he governed from 1980 to 1989. And one can argue that he governed as a client of the United States. Reagan said that he would make Jamaica the symbol of communism in the third world. Sorry, symbol of capitalism. And the Americans poured a lot of aid, which would have been a lot of aid at that time, into Jamaica under Seaga. Reagan actually visited. The only English-speaking Caribbean Reagan visited was Jamaica. And he also went to Grenada post-revolution. But he visited Jamaica. They poured a lot of aid. Companies like McDonald's and all these American fast food companies were in Jamaica very early during the Seaga period. So Seaga probably is the government that you can say was the closest to being directly, if you will, directed by the United States. All the other countries in the Caribbean were friendly to the United States, but I don't think that they were puppets of the United States. Eventually, Burnham lost power because the Cold War had come to an end, and the United States and the Soviet Union no longer had need to be as influential in the Caribbean as they were. and a combination of internal economic pressure. But where Burnham went wrong with the Americans was not so much his policies, but his attitude to democracy. And so by the end of the Cold War, it became about democracy. And that's where the PNC fell out of favor with the Americans. I came into power, and I moved the country towards more formal democracy. The first independent newspaper was opened in the form of the Stabroek News. He continued to rig elections. He rigged the 85 election, but he eased a lot of the restrictions. He pulled back a lot of the Marxists. He denationalized sections of the economy and so forth. In the end, in 1992, he couldn't win a free and fair elections, and so that's where he was out. Jagan came in, and Jagan went along with what was the only game in town. Remember, the Soviet Union is gone by the time Jagan comes to power in 1992. The Soviet Union is gone, so there is no Soviet Union to be a puppet to. And so Jagan told the American line, because America was the only game in town. Did the Americans tell Jagan what to do? I doubt it. I don't think Jagan and Burnham and those chaps, the Americans could have told them what to do. Like I said, if the Soviet Union were still in power, I think Jagan would have come close to being a puppet of the Soviet Union. He was so inflexible with his communism and so on that he would have come close to being a puppet of the Soviets. But I don't think Burnham was a puppet. Was Burnham influenced? Did he carry out some of the wishes of the Americans? Yes. But on the big issues, nationalization of the economy and so on, he did not toe the line of the Americans. Now, I heard you mention the WPA, and if the WPA can be measured by Guyana, in the 1960s, the Americans had gone to Guyana and told him that they would not have mind what they call a Scandinavian kind of socialism. I think the Americans had become practical, that in a place like Guyana, you couldn't have a capitalist government. And they were prepared to go along with a kind of socialism in Burnham. And they went to Guyana and suggested a Scandinavian type of socialism, meaning socialism like they have in Sweden and Denmark and those places. And I think Guyana's position was very clear to them that you can't come in my country and tell me what kind of government you want, right? So that's that, right? So I think you got it right with geopolitical influence on our governments, but when you say they were all puppets, it is on the surface true, in the sense that they all were in the US backyard, and so therefore were always conscious of what the US wants. But for the most part, they were not puppets. Puppets suggest that you are lock, stock, and barrel controlled by an external force. After Jagan died and the new Jagdeo and them came to power, they become much more ideologically palatable for the Americans, because they were implementing the neoliberal / new capitalist philosophy, which they still do. And so the Americans have no problem with that. But as you said, I don't know that the coalition was a puppet to the Americans. The Americans would have exercised influence, I am sure. But whether they carried out the Americans' agenda, I doubt whether they did. But this present government was installed by the Americans and the other Western countries and CARICOM involved. And so this present government is perhaps the closest to a puppet government. Although they, as you notice, they are poking their fingers in the Americans' eyes. They are going along with the Americans when it comes to Exxon and oil and so on. But they're not going along with the Americans when it comes to democracy. So again, the question of puppetry is much more problematic, you know? It's much more problematic. Much more problematic. But I would agree that this present government is perhaps the one that comes closest to be called a puppet. Although, like I said, a puppet means that you are under the direct influence and control of a foreign power. All of our governments may be indirectly under the influence, not necessarily the control, under the influence of a foreign government, but not necessarily lock, stock, and barrel. As I say, even this government, which I think comes close to being a puppet, they're a puppet when it comes to oil and gas, but when it comes to democracy and the equitable distribution of wealth, they're poking their fingers in the Americans' eye.
Thank you. Thank you for your definition and your explanations. In my mind, I'm saying, you know, fair positions. For me, lock, stock, and barrel as against influencing the major decisions. I think that's where we depart the stations differently. Amobi Soyinka is saying that you, in discussing puppets in this region in particular, you totally forgot Eric Geary, who should be at the top of the list.
I don't think Eric was a puppet either. You see, Soyinka, I'm glad you mentioned Eric Geary. I don't think Eric Geary was a puppet of the Americans. I think Eric Geary, those fellas love power too much. Yeah. For them to sit down and have the Americans call them and tell them what to do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and power. Eric Geary just simply loves power. But the Americans supported them because they were anti-communist. And insofar as they were anti-communist, they had the support of the United States. But I don't think Eve McGarry, Verboord, Robert Bradshaw, I don't think those saps would sit down and have the Americans. I remember interviewing Eugenia Childs, who was as right-wing as they come. If there was a right-wing leader, she would have been. But she told me the Americans were telling her, not to produce soap. And she said, and I told them that it is not because you don't like it that I must do it. It's hard to see that generation. They were very nationalistic. They were 10 times more nationalistic than the ones today. And it's hard for somebody to tell them what to do and what not to do. They went along with it. You see, the Grenada invasion, for example, they did not want the Americans. They wanted the British to intervene. And the British said, no thanks. And that is when Eugenie and Tom Adams and Siag and them turned to the Americans. They didn't go to the Americans first. They went to the British. Because they were wary of American imperialism. And so they went to the British, and the British tell them, no, we are not into that invasion thing. And so they went to the Americans, and the British didn't like it. Because the British are saying, we are still head of state. Our queen is still the head of state of Grenada. Because Grenada is still was not a republic, still is not a republic, so the queen is the titular head. And then the Americans invaded Grenada. In fact, what they invaded was a sovereign state of the British, and the British didn't like it. So even at that level, people like Eugenia Childs and and Tom Adams and so on were wary of American imperialism.
Thank you.
So to my friend Sayoko, no, I wouldn't say Gary was a puppet. Gary loved power. Burnham loved power. All of them loved power. Eric Williams, for example, he reneged on Chaguaramas agreement. That the base, the American base at Chaguaramas, he campaigned that he was going to take back the base, and when he got into power, he changed his mind because he thought that it was not practical, and he fell out with CLR James on that issue. But you could hardly look at Eric Williams and call him a puppet of anybody. They were not. They were nationalists. They loved power, and it is hard for somebody to call them and tell them, do this, do that, do that, do that. No.
But in support of their enjoyment of power, couldn't it have been a bargaining tool?
But yes, they made practical decisions to support the Americans on the broad issue of being against communism. And insofar as Americans didn't like communism, they didn't go communist. So one can say that they supported the Americans' trajectory on the Cold War. But like I said, Burnham became a Marxist. He declared in 1974 the Declaration of Sophia.
Yes, sorry. One of the things I said in my discourse yesterday is that Burnham, I can't remember the exact word, but basically Burnham eventually turned coat, rebelled, whatever, and fell out, and that is why he was getting the hardships he was getting.
No, he didn't fall out with them. I think you got the history wrong. They accommodated him.
Up until
the American ambassador said, we are comfortable with the socialism of the PNC. So in a sense, it is Burnham who played the big powers. The big powers didn't play Burnham.
That's noted. I'm saying that I'm saying he fell out with them, or let me say the power dynamics changed, because when they recognized, in my understanding, what was happening, they started pressuring them, which ended caused us to end up losing the PL480 and all those kind of favorable things that the Burnham government for wheat and international financial support and stuff like that. Wasn't it as a result of him falling out with them, or they determining?
Well, no, he fell out with them, but he didn't fall out with them on the issue of them telling him what to do. They were comfortable so long as he was keeping jabbing out. By the 1980s, the Cold War was coming to an end. So the American foreign policy changed. In fact, American foreign policy changed since under Carter in 1976. Carter came to power and said, American foreign policy will no longer be grounded in anti-communism. It would be a foreign policy that would be grounded in human rights. And that's where Burnham fell foul of the Americans on the human rights issue. Just as the PPP, this present PPP is falling foul of the Americans on the human rights issue. All right? So Burnham fell foul of the Americans, not on the broad communism story. They were comfortable with this communism. They rather Burnham communism than Jackson communism. So Burnham didn't fall out with them on that. Burnham fell out with them when the Cold War began to come to an end, and the American foreign policy shifted from anti-communism to pro-democracy. It was at that point that Burnham fell out with them.
Thank you. Let's turn our attention to another big regional issue I consider, because again the question was asked yesterday in relation to Haiti. Why Haiti is so poor? It's still in poverty, despite the fact that they were forced out of the bloc with independence, having defeated France and so on. Again, just now, because of the concept of puppeteering and puppeteering government, I see the hand of the US and other international dealers and wielders as having a major stake in keeping Haiti poor. Apart from the quote unquote compensation to France, the involvement of the US is believed to be the primary factor which has caused Haiti to be in the state it is.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Well, Haiti was punished. It was punished. That's where we have to start. Haiti was punished.
God, can you hear me now? Yes, it seems as though you're hearing me now. We have to fix the song for Dr. Hines. Dr. Hines, can you hear me still?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Good. I hope the viewers will hear me. All right, so yes, because of blackout, we had some problems. So you're getting some now, I think. Can you hear Dr. Hines when he speaks? I'd like to know that.
Yeah,
Are you hearing Dr. Hines, viewers? Kindly indicate.
I hope they're hearing me. I hope they're hearing me.
Dr. Hines, so you're being heard. Let me try to add your video back to the I'm in new territory here. It's the first time I'm being challenged by this with it's called StreamYard. I'm now using StreamYard.
Oh, you're StreamYard now. Okay.
All right, so can you see and hear Dr. Hines now? Please and thanks. Indicate. Can you see and hear Dr. Hines?
Test 1, 2, 3.
Yes,
One, two.
yes, they're seeing and hearing you. So you are addressing the Haiti question. Thanks.
Yeah, I was saying the Americans invaded Haiti from 1915 to 1934. So they were there 19 years. And they raided the Haitian treasury because they said that the Haitians had owed American banks money that they had borrowed to service the debt, the so-called debt to France. And so they raided the treasury and took all the money out. Now, the economists will tell you that if a country for that length of time, all its money is going overseas, and none of the money is used to develop the country will remain underdeveloped. So the root of Haitian economic underdevelopment lies in the fact that for over 120 or 30 years, they did not use their resources to build an economy. And so that is the explanation for the poverty in Haiti. Now, does the Americans and others prefer Haiti to be poor? Of course. If Haiti is poor, as it is, if Jamaica is poor, if Guyana is poor, it means we become sites for cheap labor. So the American companies can go into Haiti and get their sneakers and clothes assembled. The Haitians, they pay the Haitians $2 per day. And they put those things together and they bring them to America and they sell them, at $200, $300, $400, $500. So the fact that Haiti remains poor means that they are a source of cheap labor. And that applies to Haiti as it applies to Jamaica. In Jamaica, they had, during the Siaga era, they had come up with something called the enterprise zone, where a company goes into Jamaica, went into Jamaica, and they operate as though they're not in Jamaica. They're not subject to, they weren't subject to Jamaica law, anything. They employ Jamaicans, they pay them piss poor wages, they make their money, and they gone. They don't have to pay taxes, they're not subject to the law, and so on and so forth. They were called enterprise zones. And that happened during Siaga period, right? So Haiti and the rest of the Caribbean are seen as places that you can get things done, labor at very cheap price. Mexico, labor at very cheap price. So in that sense, the Americans, from an economic standpoint, would like to keep these countries poor. If they are poor, it means that the demand for better wages will be less. You see, American companies, what they pay the Haitians $2 a day, they can't pay American workers $2 per day. They have to pay more. So they're moving companies are moving out of the United States into places like Haiti, into places like Mexico. And they're producing their goods there at very cheap labor price. And so they make more profit in the United States. So in that sense, the Americans would like to keep Haiti poor.
And that's it. That's the I'd say the economic aspects of things. How was the Americans influence the political instability of Haiti? I mean, is that does that instability benefit the Americans?
Well, yes and no. Depends on who is in charge. After a time, the instability doesn't work if you have economic interest in a country. You want that country to be stable. You don't want the country to be unstable. So I don't think the Americans want the instability. Americans want to influence who governs, but they also want stability. And the challenge is that sometimes you back a government that is not popular in the country, and that leads to instability. And you see, that is the challenge that the Americans face in a place like Guyana. In that, they're supporting the PPP government for economic reasons, because the PPP government is not challenging the oil companies, the oil status quo. They're not. But in exchange, the PPP is saying, allow us a free rein to govern in an autocratic way. But that autocracy itself leads to upheaval and instability. And that is why the Americans are challenging the Guyana government on the question of democracy, because they know that the undemocratic governance of the PPP is not sustainable, and that eventually it will lead to instability. And instability is not in their interest, is not in their economic interest. So what the Americans are finding in a place like Guyana is that their economic interests are not being well served by their political preferences. They have a political preference for the PPP, but the PPP's mode of governance is not good. It's not a guarantee of stability. Hence, their economic interests will be challenged. And it's the same thing in Haiti. For a long time, after 1934, after the Americans left in 1934, they influenced the governments. And Papa Doc came to power in the 1950s, and he was ruthless, he was a butcher. But he was anti-communist, and the Americans went along with him. When he died, his son took over, Baby Doc. And it was not until the end of the Cold War that Baby Doc was deposed. And then who came to power? Aristide. And Aristide began to preach. Well, first of all, the soldiers came to power. And the soldiers were equally butchery, like Papa Doc and Baby Doc. And that led to the election of Aristide. Aristide was very left and very nationalistic, and began to challenge the foreign companies and began to talk about liberation of the poor. Liberation theology. He was a Catholic priest. And that attempt at nationalism on the part of Aristide did not go along well with the Americans. And so they moved against him. Right? So your thesis of Americans always trying to influence the politics of the Caribbean is a very sound thesis. Was Aristide a puppet of the Americans? No. Did the Americans try to influence him? Yes. Was he a puppet? No. So that's what I'm saying. Your thesis is partly true, that the Americans influenced. But when you begin to talk about puppetry involves not just the client state. Sorry, it doesn't. A puppetry involves the outside force saying to the client, I want you to do this. But if the client doesn't say, yes, I will do it, puppetry doesn't come into play. Puppetry comes into play when the sponsoring state says, I want you to do this. And the client state says, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. That's where puppetry comes in. And my argument is that did not obtain under Burnham or Hoyt or jargon, and to a large extent under the present PPP crowd. The present PPP crowd saying yes, sir, when it comes to oil. But when it comes to, you've got to reform Chico, you've got to implement shared governance, you've got to stop racial profiling, you've got to distribute the resources. The PPP saying, no, no, sir, no, sir. In that sense, they're not a client. They're not a puppet, sorry. They're a client, but not a puppet. Because the puppet means that whatever your master tells you, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Thank you. At no point did I define Aristide as a puppet. As a matter of fact,
No, I didn't say you.
No. Yes, I'm just saying that. In terms of the U.S. influence in Haiti for me has gone beyond influence. I'm aware that the U.S. intervention has seen what we call a suspension of the Haitian constitution. For the last several presidents after Aristide, it is believed that they were basically installed by the U.S. to serve U.S. interests, right up to this recent one. And here I ask you to comment on the current situation with CARICOM becoming a part of the melee now, and led by Ali and Mia and Gonzalez are working to install yet another undemocratic or use another undemocratic route to try to resolve the problems in Haiti in the formation of this so-called 7-member committee, presidential committee, whatever they call it. Your thoughts on this most recent development?
Well, look, it's problematic. It's problematic. For Haiti to, in the short term, come out of the situation that it has found itself in. That is, you move from a client government to no government. And this is what I'm trying to point out here, is the risk when you have external intervention. External intervention serves the purpose of the sponsoring state, right? And often that is at odds with the internal dynamics of the country. So the attempt by the Americans to control what happens in Haiti, who governs in Haiti, inevitably led to a breakdown of the state. It was the Americans, for example, who dismissed the army. So, I mean, the Haitians don't have a standing army, and so on. An army is a very important aspect of the state. So, in trying to bring about, quote unquote, stability in Haiti, because the army was always a humbug, they were always causing coups and so on. So you get rid of them. But what you left is a very important aspect of the state that is gone. And so Haiti has moved quickly into anarchy. And the anarchy now is working against US interests. So it is US intervention that led to the anarchy. And the anarchy is against the US interests. And that is why external intervention is never a very good thing. Because you settle your own interests and you leave the country itself unstable. It's like in our country, right? When the US chooses one party over the other, it is really choosing one race over the other. And their intention is not to cause racial disarmament. Their intention is to look after their interests. Who governs? PPP? All right, we gone with the PPP. But you install the PPP, and then the PPP is not supported by the other major ethnic group. That sets up an ethnic conflict with you, the Americans, do not bargain for. So the consequence of the US intervention It has what they call intended consequences. That is, you get the government to be hospitable to your companies, to your economic investment, but there are unintended consequences. There is no ethnic conflict that is on, and this is the problem with external intervention. It is a problem in Haiti. It is a problem in Guyana. And I come back to Guyana always because I think to understand Haiti, we should understand what's happening in Guyana. They're not dissimilar. They're very similar what's happening in both countries. You know, so that is why I keep coming back to Guyana in order to explain what's happening in Haiti. The attempt at control and influence has intended consequences. That is, you get the governments to toe your line politically, economically, well, economically. But they don't normally toe your line politically, internally. And then that leads to the instability.
I think they say you can't come straight into.
And the instability then works against your economic interests. And so that's what you're seeing there in Haiti. In trying to shape the Haitian state, in trying to control Haiti, you then have unintended consequences. So we're at the point the state has to be cobbled together in Haiti. And it can't be done only by the internal forces. And I would not advise it to be done only by external forces. The external forces have to work with the internal forces, including some of those same gangs, to put together a stable state in Haiti. The external forces cannot do it alone. If they do it alone, they're going to go right back as they did with the Aristide period, when they kidnapped Aristide and took him to Africa.
Yes.
And then that led to instability. They have to work with the internal forces, some of whom are these gangs. They have to work with them.
Thank you. Big up yourself, Raskofi. Morning. Welcome to the program. So, Raskofi has a statement. How can we be sure that they do not? Morning, neighbor, morning. Are you morning? Are you morning? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is 20 minutes past the 7 o'clock hour. I am your host, Kidaki Amsterdam. It's the 4th day of the 4th month in the 24th year. Is that right? 4th of April, 2024. How you been? How was you yesterday? How was your yesterday? How was your last night? What did you achieve yesterday that gives you hope today? It looks as though the doctor forgot that he and I got a date. An appointment, that is. But fret not. The conversation shall continue. I'm trying to find my way around this up. Yeah, morning. Oh yeah, what was yesterday? Yesterday we had a healthy discourse. And by popular request, Dr.
I'm saying that all of these things are happening now.
Dr. Hines should have been back here today for us to continue that conversation. You requested it, not me. Not bargain for the ethnic conflict. Yes, but I don't see Dr. Hines here, which means that he must have forgotten. It happens. He's not accustomed to being on Thursdays. And so I want to say most likely that's the reason for him not being on this morning. You gotta forgive us. We are adults, we are elders by now. We're getting old, When you get old, you just get a little forgetful and think. Adult brained. Is that what they say? Your brain getting adult? Whatever that is. Anyways, what went on yesterday that makes you optimistic that today would be a better day? I can tell you what has made me optimistic that today would be a better day. All right, good. All right, so the doctor said he's on his way. For those of you who believe that when I come here in the mornings and I raise issues and so on, there's some people who believe that talking, as they say, doesn't change anything and doesn't achieve anything and so on and so forth. And I've been talking for the last 3 or 4 years, whatever that time period is. And I will continue to talk. There are times when I act also. When I act also. But the reality is talk has its purpose and it has its own impact. I remember yesterday morning, or was it the day before yesterday morning, I tell you all about Big Old Agile and the hole on Charles P. Public Road. Well, by yesterday at what? Let's say about 2 o'clock yesterday, it was being fixed. So sometimes it seems as though people only know what they have to do and you come and you call them out publicly on what they have to do. Right? So they always being fixed. But I, in my usual way, I have a nasty attitude, if you call it nasty. I deal with a matter and it would appear close to a lot of people, but I still continue to ruminate. I still continue to think, I still continue to ponder on that matter. Right? And I look at all angles. Why this is so, why that was so, and so on and so forth. And so in my meanderings, in my thinking, I ask myself, wait. Because that road was being fixed about, let's say, close to 2 yesterday. But then about 5 or 6 yesterday, I saw a set of screaming sirens coming from the East Coast. And so I stopped and I asked myself, wait, I wonder if that is why the road was fixed. Some people might say I'm contradictory. I'm saying the road was fixed because I talked about it. I highlighted it. But knowing the PPP, would I want to give CAMS TV such a big up? Kiraki Amsterdam talk about road and we jump up on fixed road. Is that a possibility? I think yes, it's a possibility because it's an embarrassment to them when people highlight these things. But then step back. I know in the past roads were fixed, and I'm serious, in the past when we didn't get this kind of money and so on, the PPP operatives used to find money to repave roads when they were going to visit areas and so on. You will remember when you look around the city where they got potholes and so on, potholes for decades, right? Potholes for decades, and then suddenly you wake up in the morning and see they're fixing potholes. You know immediately that some dignitary, as they call themselves, is visiting the area soon. And so I'm asking myself, I wonder if it's because these sirens were going to be coming down the East Coast that this road, this patch of road was fixed around 2 o'clock. Now, if that were the case, I dare say we are in bad shape because only the comfort of the big wigs matter. Only the safety of the big wigs matter. And so we have to interrogate these actions. And that is what I do. I don't just take things at face value and say, well, it fixed. Good enough. We talk about it, it fixed. You still got to know why it was fixed. Right? And for whose benefit it was fixed. Yeah. Like how they're building all these big hotels and state of the art, this and state of the art of that. For whose benefit? You think it's support people? The ordinary working class in this society. Nah. It's the PPP and the rich friends. Continue to interrogate these things. Later in the day, though, I intend to pass back there and see what the state of the fixed road is. Because when it was being fixed, I observed, I made a past driving that they don't have the right kind of equipment here to fix this road and fix it properly. I didn't see a roller that, light or heavy roller that, will roll it and ensure that it comes to the same level with the widest section of the road and so on and so forth. So I got to pass and see what's the quality of the fix. Yeah, I'm a quality assured man. Anyways, it's 7:29. Dr. Hines is here with us. We did promise to continue to have that conversation that we were having yesterday. And so I did say to Dr. Hines, when he comes back today, we will start from where we left off. And so I'm going to just allow Dr. Hines to start from where he left off. Right? So Dr. Hines, welcome to the program. Thank you for giving us another day of your time. Sacrificing some more sleep for the revolution. And so, like yesterday, we were having these conversations about the geopolitical influence and so on, and we were talking about the role of Brother Usikwan. Jambo and Dugu, happy 99th. 99 years is a stellar performance. 99 is stellar performance if you're at the crease. And Brother Usi stays at the crease up until now. We give thanks to that, and we wish you many, 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 many more years. Because we know once we have your wisdom to call on, and your guidance and everything else. Yeah, so Dr. Hines, the mic is yours. Let's continue that conversation from yesterday. Are you hearing me? Seems as though Dr. Hines is not hearing me. Dr. Hines? Dr. Hines? Yeah, I'll wait for me, man. Dr. Hines is not hearing. Can you hear me, sir? Hello? Good morning. Doc? What story is this? Dr. Hines? I gotta send a message. Doc? Good morning. Hello? What trouble this is? I'll bear strain. The last time I used the term bear strain, somebody said bear strain is a certain set of people. I don't know if y'all know what we're talking about, bro. Hey fans, it's karaoke and oldies night this and every Thursday at Clock Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton. Dance to the magical songs of yesteryear by popular DJs and Camps Audio. Admission is free. Come out. Let's make memories at Clock Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton North. I'm talking to you on the program, but like you're not hearing
They said I'm muted, but I don't see that I'm muted.
You burn this wine when I want you shine.
Alright, so see you
The tree
later,
of
now.
life, them I want you climb.
Alright.
Cause them heart not kind. Comes, I said them
I think I'm hearing you now. Can you hear me?
Massive. Kidaki, red hat.
You can get meat anywhere, but for the best cuts
Thanks.
of chicken, beef, pork, mutton, and lots more, check out T&W Harris Butcher Shop, located in the East Ramveld Market Meat Section. Call us on 609-7168,
Doc?
641-4494. Ask
Hello.
for Rastaman. T&W Harris Butcher Shop for the best in fresh cut meats and lots more.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Dr. Hines? All right. Technicalities abound. All right, so I ended the Zoom. You should log in and let me join you. Good. Let's see how that works. All right. Yes. We're working on it. Just a few things. How y'all coping with this blackout business, man? Can you imagine 3 years after, 4 years after being in government, the current administration is still blaming the previous administration for the failures in the electricity sector? Can you imagine that? You know, when I talk about the quality of leadership that we get from, or we got from the coalition versus that which we get from the PPP, a lot of people get upset and they behave as though what I talk about is not reality and is not true and is not accurate and all of that. Good. But the evidence is always out there. You can always judge. When the coalition came to office, when the coalition came to office, they set about fixing things. And among the things that were fixed, or among the things that were being fixed, was GPL. Can you hear me now, sir? Can you hear me now? Dr. Hines? Hello? Say something, man. Doc?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, but you're not responding.
But I'm not hearing you.
Well, I don't know what the issue was. Anyhow, we are here. Right? We are here. So just give me a few to conclude this thought that I was sharing with viewers. So I was saying
it befuddles me. It's a disgusting thing that 3 or 4 years after taking office, this current administration continues to blame the previous administration for the failures in the electricity sector, when the evidence is that the previous government, as in the coalition, did a lot of things or did something, no matter how little you want to call it, that was contributing to the alleviation of this problem. Blackouts were becoming a thing of the past. Maintenance schedules were being kept. But despite access to all of these resources and so on, and you know, every day for the last week is an extended blackout, unscheduled, I dare argue. And you see Ali saying they inherited GPL with problems. The coalition inherited GPL with problems, and they worked on fixing those problems. Patterson can give a whole long list of them, changing transmission cables and bringing in new generators and so on. But I'm hearing now, I don't know, that some friend of the government is attempting to buy 4 generators, I think, from Brazil for $3 million US to sell to the government. And these are used generators to sell to GPL for $40 million US. And while managers are recognizing it as a scam, the higher ups in the government, a particular minister of government, or let me say a big one in government, is forcing the management of GPL to accept the deal. They're going to pay 13 times more for used generators to bring to further burden the Guyanese people. Y'all pay attention to that. We will continue that conversation maybe tomorrow on Free Talk Friday. Dr. Hines.
Good morning.
Good morning. I was saying based on commitment that we will continue that conversation from yesterday. I'm happy that you're here and thank you for another sacrifice of your sleep twice in the week. At the same time, shout out to Brother UC on his 99th birth anniversary. We wish him long life. And when we closed the program, I basically said to you that you continue from where you left off yesterday. So the microphone is yours.
But remind me where I left off.
All right. Good. So the question, one of the questions we were supposed to deal with in depth as well, you remember, is the question basically about the attitude that suits the time. I'm paraphrasing here. What is the attitude that suits the time in terms of dealing with the PPP and Bar Jackdaw and so on, right? Whether the attitude that is needed was or is a confrontational one, or what many might call is this current quote unquote laissez-faire approach. What would be the best approach for dealing with the PPP in their current construct?
Well, there's no single approach in dealing with a government of this nature. One has to continue to do the work and capitalize on openings when they present themselves. I said I wasn't going to comment on Norton's tenure. But one in answering that question, one has to make reference to his tenure. You see, when you become the leader, the number one, you are no longer the leader of your tendency or the leader of yourself. If you're leading a party, you become the leader of all the factions in the party. See, before you become the #1 leader, you can champion a particular tendency, a particular approach. In Norton's case, he was a militant of the party. But once he became leader, unless the entire party is militant, he has to pivot and lead all the factions in the party. And that is what I was alluding to yesterday when the question was posed to me about leader. And people sometimes think that being a leader is an easy thing. It's not easy. Norton made it very plain, very clear that he was not going to be a maximum leader. You see, if you're a maximum leader, it means the followers will go along with you, whatever you do. You know, whether you were Burnham or Jagan, they were maximum leaders. And people went along with them. And Norton said he was not going to be a maximum leader. And I don't think it was possible for him to be a maximum leader anyway, even if he wanted to, because times have changed. And so here was someone who was elected as a militant because people felt that the leadership of David Granger was not militant enough to deal with Jack Dio and the PPP. Hence, they moved to a militant leader. But once the militant leader got into office, he found that there were many factions in the party who were not militant and who didn't want militancy. He also found that the situation was much more complex than he probably envisaged, because we have moved into a new era. We weren't dealing just with Jack Dio and the PPP. We were dealing with geopolitics. We were dealing with the Americans, we were dealing with the EU, we were dealing with Venezuela. We were dealing with a very complex situation. And so therefore, the militant came to power and found that he could not govern as a militant. And I think that's the dilemma that Norton found himself in. My own view was that he should have gone back or come out and explain it the way I am explaining it here. And to say to people, look, you elect me as a militant, but I got in here and I recognize that this thing calls for more than militancy. I don't know why he didn't do that. He may say that he did that, but many people may say that he didn't do that. And so it goes to your question. What kind of approach is needed? And I'm saying, no, it is no single approach. Because you're not dealing with a government that is operating in a predictable way. You're not dealing with a government that is operating in a situation that is simple. And so it is very difficult being a leader in an environment like this, being the top leader. And I think Norton is finding that out. It is very difficult when you are in opposition to satisfy your constituents. When you're in government, you have power, you can make things happen, you can deliver services, you can deliver things to your constituency. And so therefore, whatever faults you may have as a leader doesn't show up very much. But when you are in opposition, you are leading people who are dissatisfied, people who are angry. But you don't have the power of the government and the state with you, so you can't deliver anything to them. As leader of the opposition, you are called upon to deliver victories every day. And the ultimate is to deliver the government to your people, knock out the opposition, knock down the opposition. And so being a leader in opposition is difficult. Being a leader in opposition in a country like Guyana at this time is complex and difficult. So the answer to your question is there's no single tendency to deal with this government. You constantly have to do the work because there are certain tools that any workman or workwoman must have. As the opposition in this time, certain tools are taken away from you. The tool of militancy has to be carefully used. It has to be creatively used in an environment like this. You see? And so being the top leader at a time like this, it's a very difficult undertaking. Very difficult undertaking. And it is not for me to come to the rescue of Norton. He will have to explain himself. But that is what I mean when I said yesterday that I do not come out of a culture that says you must say you want to be leader. You know, I do not come out of that culture at all. And I take my hat off to people who are brave enough to put up their hand and say, I want to be leader. Norton is brave to take on the leadership of a party after what happened in 2020.
So,
where you have an imposed government that has the support of powerful external forces. You have a constituency that is demoralized. You have to be brave to put your hand up and say you want to be leader in circumstances like that. Yeah.
You have to be brave. In the same breath, I was asked as late as yesterday, because you did mention that leadership takes on certain kinds of responsibilities and so on, and like you just said, it's hard. Are those the things which are preventing you from saying?
No. What is preventing me is that I do not come out of that culture. Let me repeat myself. I do not come out of a culture that says I come and say I want to be leader. If the force of the situation pushes one to the point where leadership is asked of you, as I said, I will consider it.
Well, Doctor, is that a split hairs here?
Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. In considering it, I will have to consider whether I am the right person for the leadership at that time. That is what I mean when I say I'll consider it. It is not that one is running away from leadership. Any fool can say I want to be a leader. And many fools have said they wanted to be leader and they end up being exactly that, foolish people. Right? There are some people who look at the situation and said, I think I have what it takes to be the number one leader. They put their hands up and they go forward. All right? I do not come out of that culture. Even if I look at the situation and feel, that maybe I can be the top leader, I am not going to think leadership is not what you assign to yourself. Leadership is assigned to you by people because you have to lead people. And people have to say they want you to lead them.
Good. A lot of philosophy there. I hope I'm not among the fools, right, who dare say I want to lead, I think I can lead. I was about to say to you, yes, it is people.
No, I think I can lead too.
Let me finish.
I just don't say that I want to be
right
the top
there.
dog.
I'm getting right there. Right? For 2 years, for 3 years, 4 years, we've been on this program. The people who listen to this program, the people who support this program, the people who tune into your Dr. Hinds, have been consistently saying that you have something to offer. I will read the statement of, I think this is Colin Barnwell. Colin Barnwell says this: the WPA is the only wing of the opposition that can fill that void. I'm counting on you, Dr. Hinds and Kidaki. The country needs you now more than ever. For the last 4 years, we've been hearing a lot of these statements, calling on Dr. Hinds to lead, asking if Dr. Hinds would lead. Aren't these enough to say, well, the people want you to lead?
Well, it depends on what you mean by lead. I think I am leading. I don't hear anything there from Mr. Barnwell that says he wants Dr. Hinds to be the top dog.
You know, I guess it's semantics and so on. So
no, it's not semantics.
I don't know.
Leadership is a very serious thing. Very, very serious undertaking that must not be trifled with. That is why you don't have leaders come every day.
Yeah, but it baffles me. It really, really is baffling me, quite frankly. Yes, leadership is a serious thing. Dr. Hinds, you've been in the forefront of political activism, and I dare argue leadership for as old as I am. Right? At this time, a viewer is saying, we need you more than ever. What is the situation that we're dealing with that demands or
I am leading. I am leading, and I don't know why you think I am not leading.
But Dr. Hinds, people, and let me make it clear, people would want to see you first and foremost, because the question was asked yesterday again. Are you the leader of WPA? People want to see you lead WPA. People are saying they want to see you lead WPA. Let me finish. Let me finish. People want to see you lead WPA. They've been calling for it. People want to see you in leading a national government.
I have not heard that. I have not heard that.
Is it the first time you hear people say, we want Dr. Hinds as prime minister, we want Dr. Hinds as president? Is it the first time you're hearing that?
Yes. I have not heard anybody say they want me to be president and prime minister. People have asked for me to play a role, and I'm playing that role, and I'm prepared to play that role.
Dr. Hinds, I've heard from very higher ups in the PNC that they are willing to consider you to lead the next electoral campaign for presidency.
I'm sure you heard wrong. I'm very sure you are wrong. I don't think any PNC person is going to want Dr. Hinds to be the top man ahead of a PNC person. That is crazy.
You want me to step back in history and talk about those things?
No, I don't want to step back in history. I think
who was leader of the PNC at the time was willing to see what do you see Guyanese as leading?
No, Burnham wasn't the leader at that time. Okay. At that time, Jagan was a leader, and Burnham was challenging Jagan for leadership, and Martin Carter proposed Guyanese as a compromise leader.
Right, and history, Doctor, history is what you say. Once Jagan didn't sanction it, that was it. He wasn't going to take anybody's leadership or opportunity to lead. Right, I'm paraphrasing there. Good. Yeah. So here we are. Tyler Paul, I don't know what you're talking about. Here we are.
I think you may be creating something that is not there.
And what is that?
That some or the other somebody wants me to be the top leader. I don't hear that from any quarter. I don't hear that from anybody. And I am not.
Viewers, the lines are open right now. For the next 10 minutes, we're going to do a poll. For the next 10 minutes, I'm serious. For the next 10 minutes, we're going to do a poll.
No, I don't
agree or disagree that you want Dr. Hinds to lead.
No.
Lead the WPA first and foremost, and lead a national government.
Kidaki, please do not.
I'm doing it
Do
because
not,
this, look.
do not impose that on me.
No, I'm not imposing it,
Impose
Dr. Hines. This is, sorry. I don't always go against your wishes. This morning, I want to prove that I'm not making something, or I'm not trying to make something where there is nothing. Flash Gordon is on the line. Is the first caller. Flash Gordon is a Norton man. Call it like.
Good morning to you. Good morning, Mr. David.
Specific question, no long talk. Go ahead.
You are a genius, Mr. David. Good morning to all my black brothers and sisters in Guyana. Help is on the way. And Abby Norton will do the rest when we do our best. Put all our eggs in Abby Norton basket. Mr. David Hines, thank you for giving you credit for the way you explain yourself. And that is the way, yes, I believe my leader should have explained himself. Are you still there?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm
you
here.
can answer the question that I call you to answer. And no long talk. I want you to answer a specific question. Do you see or want Dr. Hines to lead the WPA and the national government or not?
But you never give me time to explain.
No, I mean, I want
Yes,
explanation,
Kidaki, you
want
can't
answer.
impose that on people, man.
This school I came out from. When you said no, you must have a chance to explain why you said no. If you said yes, you must have a chance to say yes.
My Flash, this is a police thing for
Let me say this to you. Do not force the ass to drink to eat grass, and you could take your ass to the well, but you cannot make it drink water.
Yesterday yesterday's discussion.
Our time is not God time. God time is our time. Mr. David time, he's telling you over and over, he's not ready. He is pleased that what he's doing right now and enjoy that benefit and teaching us. His time is not ready yet, and I would not agree with him for saying yes, his time is now. No, my brother, take your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your response. Yesterday in our having this conversation, I will always remember these words because I've heard them before. Had UC Kwana accepted to be the premier at the time when it was offered or whatever, Ghana would have been a different place, or might have been a different place. Right? I don't know. Sometimes I might be trivial, like somebody said, don't trivialize leadership. Sometimes we miss the point. Sometimes we miss the opportunity to change the course of history. And from where I'm sitting, I don't know, and especially, let me put it this, especially among the African Guyanese community. I don't know that there are not people out there who are demanding that Dr. Hines take a more prominent leadership role. Call it life.
Morning, Kadaki. Morning, Dr. Hines.
Good morning.
People are calling for Dr. Hines to throw his hat in the ring and step up, sir. Step up. It's time for you to step up. What you waiting for when you reach 99, sir? Nah, man. Now is the time. Please. We wait too long. How long more we must wait, sir? Thank you.
Thank you for your call. Anyhow, I know this is making Dr. Hines very uncomfortable. Let's move on. Let's move on with the discourse. But I don't know. I don't even know how to phrase it properly right now. Right? I don't even know how to phrase it because I'm on the ground. You're on the ground too. But ever so often, people reach me. People ask, and the question was asked here again yesterday, and I'm repeating it. Dr. Hines, are you the leader of the WPA? Why people are asking that question? Right? There are people who meet me and say, we want a clear pronouncement. Right? On where Dr. Hines stands on leadership of the WPA, where Dr. Hines stands on leadership of a national government and stuff like that. I don't know if they haven't been asking you, but they've been asking me. And my role here is to ask, satisfy, let the viewers get the answers that they want. Right? So forgive me if sometimes I come across as somebody say, listen, my position is this. I see Miranda asked the question something. If I think I am ready to lead, Kidaki, do you feel ready to run in a political race? Yes, I feel ready to run in a political race. I feel ready to run in a political race. It's the only test of where the people stand. It's the only way you can test what the people really want from you. If you don't put, like raffle, if you don't have a ticket, you don't have a chance. If you do not go on a ballot, you cannot say what your quote-unquote national leadership political prospects are. Let me put it as that loosely. And so, yes, from 16 years or 14 years old being involved in the politics of this country, I'm 50, soon to be 51 by God's grace. You're telling me that from then to now, I'm just here to what? Go to bite me, Roy says so. Roy said go to bite me. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm ready. Yes, scholar.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Hines and Kadaki. We gotta understand that Dr. Hines has a paying job in the United States of America. And when you come now to be leader of the party, I'm quite certain Dr. Hines will have to give up that job and his financial security. When he severs that and he don't get it from his party, then next thing you hear, borrow the colony and offering him money under the table. So if I was in Dr. Hines' position, I would have studied myself to know if I am really fitted to relinquish my proper financial independence to come out and be the leader of a party that I'm not sure what lies around the corner. Dr. Hines come out and tell the people that. And when you sit down and you explain yourself in that light, then you will know your position as being in the party. I may be wrong, but I am one of the 6 blind men of Hindustan, given a part of the elephant, and that is my terminology of what I think an elephant is. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Dr. Hines has the right to respond to that, and we'll move on from this topic.
No,
Are you considering your income or your employment, boy?
I have no response to that. I'm listening to, you asked me to listen to people, so I'm listening.
All right, so I should continue to take the calls.
Yes.
The lines remain open, right? The lines remain open. I think Dr. Hines makes a lot of sacrifices already when it comes to income and livelihood and so on. So I personally don't think that is at the top of his list of considerations, whether or not he would give up his job and then he got to be hand to mouth or looking for a handout or anything to that thing. Nobody makes decisions willy-nilly. Call your life.
Good morning, Karafi. Good morning, Dr. Hines. Good morning to all the listeners. I think Dr. Hines is anointed to be the leader, but he's waiting on his appointment from God. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Let's talk UC Quano. It's Brother UC's 99th year. Let's have some reflections. You as a little boy, as you say, a little short tail boy, used to hang around UC for quite a while. I know he has had a lot of influence on you as an individual, Buxton as a community, and the country as a whole. Share with us some of your early interactions with Brother UC and how that has impacted not only yourself, but the communities.
Well, I think what Guyana represents is something larger than himself. I think he has offered people like myself a place in politics in Guyana. Some people, you know, belong to the PNC, some belong to the PPP. And so they found a home in politics. I came up in a family and a village in which my natural home wasn't PPP or PNC. My aunt, who raised me when my mother migrated, was a very staunch PNC member. She was a member of the Women's Auxiliary. That is what the WRSM was called in those days. The Women's Auxiliary, very active. I used to go to meeting with her at Miss Green's house, and she was very, very, very active in the Women's Auxiliary and the PNC. And that's where I learned my politics as a, you know, little boy. I would follow her to meeting in the nights, and I would hear the women discuss politics and so on. And that's where my curiosity about politics was born. But when Brother UC and Burnham fell out in 1971, it was a challenge for a lot of African Guyanese, especially Buxtonians. Many took one side or the other. Some remained in the middle and didn't show their hand. My aunt took a side. She took Guyana's side. And that was 1971. I was a little child there. And so in a sense, I grew up in a home where the PNC was not a natural thing for me. What Guyana therefore represented is what I call that independent pole in Guyanese politics that then offered a home to somebody like me, right? And in that sense, he offered a home to many of us. When Walter Rodney came back to Guyana, you know, he was neither PPP nor PNC. And the Guyana tendency, which at that time was manifested as the WPA, offered a home for him. And so I think Guyana's larger significance is that he offered people who did not naturally find a home in the two sides. He offered them a space in Guyanese politics. And it is what I call the independent space. All right? After the split, as I may have explained before, the split in 1955 was not a complete split because there were Africans who remained with the Jagan faction. And Guyana, Martin Carter, Rory Westmus, you know, Brindley Ben, and a host of other African executives remained with the Jagan faction. But in 1956, they split from the Jagan faction. And in 1957, Guyana ran as an independent candidate. Jagan offered him the chairmanship of the PPP, and he said no, because he felt that he needed to be independent at that time. And so he told Jagan he was going to run as an independent. Burnham didn't field the candidate against Guyana in 1957. The PPP did. Jagan promised that he would fight Guyana. And he fielded Balram Singh Rai against Guyana. In fact, the PPP went to court challenging Guyana's candidacy, you know. Anyhow, Balram Singh narrowly won that race because that was the first manifestation of the real racial split. Because the Indians in the constituency there on the Lower East Coast, Buxton to Kitty was the constituency. The Indians voted for Balram Singh Rai and the Africans voted for Guyana. And Balram Singh Rai narrowly won, sorry. Guyana would then leave the PPP because Jagan argued against taking Guyana into the West Indies Federation. his argument was that Indians felt that they would become a minority in a West Indian nation. And so Guyana did not become part of the Federation. And Guyana and Carter and others left. Jagan referred to them as the ultra-left. And they left the PPP. Guyana then, therefore, was unaffiliated. He was neither a member of the Jaganite faction of the PPP or the Bornomite faction, right? And he had to make a critical decision. Was he going to form a new party and become the leader? We're going back to the leader thing. And become the leader of a new party? Or was he going to join Burnham and carry that independent tendency within the PNC? And he decided to join Burnham in the PNC. In fact, that is what consolidated the PNC. Because prior to that, it was the Burnhamite faction of the old PPP and the UDP, a small black middle class party led by John Carter. Those were the early factions within the PNC. They had courted Peter de Geer, but he opted out. Peter de Geer was courted to become part of that original PNC, but he opted out. When Guyana joined the PNC, took the support of the mainly rural Africans, especially on the East Coast, West Mobese. He took that support into the PNC and consolidated the PNC. In fact, when Guyana went into the PNC, Jaina Reinsing, who had left with Burnham in 55, he left the party because he didn't want Guyana in the party. But Burnham knew Guyana was bringing the rural African vote. Burnham was very popular in the town, in Georgetown. But he wasn't that popular on the East Coast and the country area. Guyana had done a lot of work in the country area. So Guyana's entry into the PNC really consolidated the PNC. He quickly became vice chairman and then he became general secretary and editor of the New Nation. So he was very powerful on entry into the PNC. Now, let me explain this carefully because I think it feeds into the question you're asking me this morning. Guyana could have decided, I am not going to join the PNC or the PPP. I'm not going to rejoin them. What I will do is that I will form a third party. He decided not to do that because I think he read the tea leaves and saw that the Indian constituency had consolidated around Jagan. As Guyana and others are leaving, the Indian bourgeoisie, C.R. Jacobs, Bihari, they are going into the PPP. They are Indian business people. Now that the black leaders have gone, the Guyanas, the Carters, etc., they went into the PPP. Indian capitalists joining an Indian Communist Party. And I think Guyana saw that and decided, I have a choice here. Do I become the leader of a third party? Or do I join another party and serve under another leader? And he chose the latter. I'm not saying, but I'm saying one has to think about leadership very seriously. Do you just want to be the top man just for the sake of being the top man? Or are you going to serve in the leadership under somebody while consolidating the constituency? And Guyana chose to serve under somebody and consolidate the constituency because the other side was consolidating. But he didn't give up his independence when he went into the PNC. Because come 1961, he argued for shared governance between Jagan and Burnham. He saw that violence was coming. Indian people and African people were getting agitated. And they were getting agitated over who governs. And he said, look, the best thing is for the two of you all to come together and govern the country. And both Burnham and Jagan rejected that. Guyana was expelled from the PNC because they said he introduced race. The PNC accused him of introducing race. And he was expelled from the PNC. But he told African Guyanese, you know, vote for the PNC. He told them, vote for the PNC. Although he was expelled from the party, he told them, vote for the PNC. Wherever the PNC is running, vote for the PNC. All right? He was afraid of independence under Jagan. In the papers blasted Sidney King. Sidney King throws a bombshell. This is weeks before the 1961 election, when he's expelled, so he's not running on the PNC ticket. Sidney King drops a bombshell. He says he cannot agree with Burnham. Burnham has a seat on the Jagan's plane for independence under the PPP. I am paraphrasing here. So he and Burnham, he and the PNC parted company over what he saw as a danger if Jagan became prime minister in an independent Guyana. He saw the Indian supremacist thing coming to the fore. And he felt that that was not the way to go. You should have a joint premiership rather than premiership by Jagan alone. And Burnham didn't agree with that. And so he was expelled from the party for taking that independent position. And he never rejoined the party, but he continued to support the party and to play a leading role when the PNC came to power with UF. He formed the Association for Racial Equality, and Burnham asked him to close it down because it was splitting black people. He closed it down. And then in '64, he formed ASCRA. And people wanted ASCRA to fight the '64 elections. Guyana went to Burnham and told him, people are coming to me in droves, asking me to run, for ASCRA to run. Burnham said, that will split the vote. Guyana said that's all he wanted to hear. He would not go down in history as splitting the black vote. He didn't do it in '56, and he's not going to do it in '64. And so what I'm saying, that Guyana's independence offered the path for the WPA, later on the AFC. And when we talk about third parties and independent politics, Guyana laid out that as far back as the '50s. However, Guyana knew when to be a one-man leader and when not to be a one-man leader. And he chose not to be a one-man leader in '56 to split the African vote. He chose not to be a one-man leader in '64 to split the African vote. So I think a lot of your conversation this morning in relation to me can be traced to the Guyana attitude. I'm a Guyanite. This is not the time for me to be talking about top leadership. There are people already who are vying for top leadership, right? And you don't need to go and say, I want to be the top leader for the sake of saying you want to be the top leader. I am happy to be part of a coalition government. I am happy to serve under other people. My concern here always is not about my position, is about what is best for the constituency in the first place and what is best for the country in the second place. whatever I think about my leadership credentials, that is not the most important thing. The most important thing in a divided society, you don't want 10 of us to be going at each other's throat on this side, trying to be the top man. That is one of the examples I have drawn from Guyana's example. It is one of the things that I've learned. That sometimes you have to temper your own ambitions. I don't think Guyana ever thought that he was not capable of being the top leader. He was the top leader in Ascria. He was the top leader of the Black cultural movement. But he very carefully, when some people were telling him, form your own party in 1956, after he left the PPP, or some people were saying, run against the PNC in 64, he declined. He declined. And history has proven him to be correct. So my attitude to leadership, my attitude to service, political service, is drawn a lot from the example of Guyana.
I might be asking you to read Brother UC's mind. But I know you've had extensive conversations with him. In any of those conversations, has he ever revisited those decisions and say, maybe, just maybe?
No. He has never second-guessed himself. The one thing he said, that he feels responsible, that by not agreeing to take the leadership in 53, when there was the impasse between Burnham and Jagan, and he was suggested as the leader, and he said no. He said that decision by him had a lot of negative impact on Jagan, because had he accepted, Jagan would have had to serve under somebody else. As it was, he rejected. Jagan remained the leader, and Jagan never served under anybody else in his entire life. And Guyana saw that as a negative in Jagan's political behavior and his political culture. So he didn't regret not agreeing to be the top dog in 53. But he recognized that his decision may have had a negative impact in relation to somebody like Jagan, who never served under another leader.
What can be those possible negative impacts? So we get educated as to what.
Well, if you're the top man all the time, all you're doing is looking down. If you serve under people, you gotta look up sometimes. So Jagan never knew how to look up. He was always looking down because he was always spiritually up. He never had the experience. Burnham served under him.
So Jagan had a superiority complex?
No. We're not talking about superiority. We're talking here about how you develop your attitude to politics. If you are the leader all the time, you are up front all the time, you don't know what's happening at the back. You know, you're not as rounded.
Is that true of what I would consider an inclusive leader? Someone who is prepared to humble his or herself and listen to the other people around them and get to the ground.
Once you become the maximum leader, in spite of yourself, once you become the maximum, no matter how nice you are, power, unchecked power, has a bad influence on human beings. No matter how good you are, no matter how well-meaning you are, once you have unfettered power in your hand, it messes you up. It messes up Burnham. Burnham did wonderful things, but Burnham supporters have to deal with the fact that Burnham became a maximum leader. Leadership messes you up. Well, not leadership, but when you become the maximum leader at the top. It messes with your mind. It messed up Jagan, it messed up Burnham. And messed up many, many leaders across the world. Look at Trump. You know, do not underestimate when everyone is bowing to you and telling you how great you are. That thing has tremendous psychological effect on people.
Very well. Let's talk about some other roles of brother you see in the, I would say, the growth of the Guyanese society. Because, for example, you mentioned the roles he played as General Secretary of the PNC and so on and so forth. I know he held at least one ministerial portfolio.
No, he never became a minister.
Oh, he never became a minister.
He turned down that several times.
Well, let's talk about that.
But he played. One of the things about Guyana's life is that he was able to influence national politics without being the top leader, and even without becoming a minister. He was once Minister of Works in 1953, and that government lasted for 133 days. That was it.
So he was a minister
under the 53 government.
Okay.
He was Minister of Works.
Okay.
Right. But when the PNC came to power in 1964, he was offered ministry. Some said he was offered deputy prime minister. Burnham even offered to send him as permanent representative to the United Nations. He turned all of those down. But he's the architect of Burnham PNC foreign policy to Africa. As soon as they came to power, he volunteered to go as an emissary of Burnham to Africa, visited 13 countries, introduced Burnham and the PNC to the African continent, took money which he collected in your village for the freedom fighters. And that was the beginning of what became the PNC's progressive foreign policy to Africa. When Burnham visited Africa for the first time, I think in 1969, Guyana was also part of that delegation. But Guyana was the person who was introducing Burnham as he made his first visit to Africa. So the whole African foreign policy that Burnham is correctly congratulated for, the architect of that foreign policy to Africa is Guyana. He was chairman of the Guyana Marketing Corporation, which was pivotal in developing agriculture and animal farming and so on among poor people, but in particular Africans. The GMC would give credit to small farmers to go buy the pig or the piglets or to buy the chicken, and then they will rear this stuff and then sell it to GMC. GMC will deduct what they gave them up front. It was a wonderful scheme, and a lot of people got their start in agriculture and cattle rearing and pig rearing in the villages through that scheme by Guyana in the GMC, Guyana Marketing Corporation. He was chairman of the committee that formed the core bank. He chaired that committee. He chaired the land reform committee. And so those were among some of the major roles that he played, as if he were a minister, but he was never a minister in the cabinet. He turned down those positions.
Thank you. I'm happy that you mentioned his role in the GMC, because somebody is asking, at what stage was he Minister of Agriculture? Because they're of the opinion that he was Minister of Agriculture.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't. But as the point I was making, that his portfolios were as if he were a minister. In fact, a lot of people in the PNC used to get mad with Burnham because they'll say, well, this man is not a party member. And why you entrusting all this responsibility to him? You know, but he and Burnham went back a long way. When Guyana would go down in the early days, he was a teacher, school teacher. And when he would go down to town to party executive meeting at nights, he would stay at Burnham's house and catch bus early in the morning to get up to Buxton to teach. They were very, very close. Burnham and Guyana were very close. Burnham and Ashton Chase were very, very close. Very, very close. So, they worked well together. It was the partnership between Guyana and Burnham between 64 and 71. I would argue was one of the best periods for African people. Not that Burnham governed as an African leader, but because of Guyana's influence, the government implemented a lot of policies that spoke to the particular needs of Africans. The cooperatives, for example, as I said, he chaired the committee that set up the Coa Bank, and the cooperative were resuscitated during that period when they were together. In fact, as I said over and over again, Burnham went to him and told him that I'm thinking of moving Guyana to a republic. And Guyana asked him, what kind of republic? Is it going to be a banana republic? And Burnham said, well, he hadn't thought it through. And Guyana said, well, why not a cooperative republic? Since the co-ops are entrenched in our history, the village movement, and so on and so forth. And he said, after that conversation, 1 week later, he heard Burnham addressing the nation and said, and ours shall be the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. So he's the author of the Cooperative Republic, because of his humility, which is something I guess has rubbed off on those of us who are his, I will use the term disciples, a kind of humility in politics. He doesn't talk about those things. I happen to know because I've been in conversations with him now in terms of gathering, first of all, interviewing him to write my master's thesis, then my PhD thesis, and then, to work on his biography. And I am learning those things, In 1964, after he decided he's not going to run against the PNC, he spoke on the PNC platform on the night. What happened in 64? There were 10 constituencies that UF was running in, around or about the city. And the PPP did not field candidates in those constituencies. They told their people to vote UF. UF ended up winning 2 of the seats because the PPP did not contest against UF. And there were some, what we call in those days, red-skinned middle-class black people who were gravitating to the UF too. And Burnham asked Guyana to deal with the issue. And Guyana spoke at Border Green on big meeting on the eve of the 64 election, big meeting at Border Green. And he dealt with the race question. He told the crowd, red nigger, black nigger, same nigger. And he said rain came down and people did not move. Some people went and they sheltered on the stalls and so on. But the meeting went on through the rain because he had the crowd, as they say, eating out of his hand. Because he was prepared to deal with the race question and to tell black people, what do you all think you're doing? Right? The Indians in the town were voting UF because the PPP didn't run. because the PPP didn't want the PNC to win those seats. And UF ended up winning 2 of the seats, like I said. And Kwayana may have averted a disaster that more black people, as he said, you know, red nigger, black nigger, same nigger. You can infer whether we need a dose of that today.
I see when St. Jordan is asking if Kwayana wasn't the chairman of GMC. I think you answered that question, right?
Yes, he was the chairman of GMC.
Right, good.
He was the chairman.
I grew up being of the opinion that Kwayana and Burnham were arch rivals or enemies. Did they follow to that extent?
Yeah, they fell out in 1971. Mm-hmm. They fell out in 1971. They fell out politically in 1971 on the question of corruption. Kwayana had begun to get complaints of corruption in government. He'd also begun to get complaints of ministers exploiting females for jobs. And he went to Burnham and spoke to Burnham about it. Burnham did set up an integrity commission. But the integrity commission, how should I put it? The ministers had to report their assets to Burnham. And Kwayana asked Burnham, well, who are you going to declare your assets to? Are you going to go in the mirror and say, I declare my assets to you and so on? So it was on corruption in government and Burnham's reluctance to move condignly, as Burnham would say, against corruption that caused the break between the two of them in 1971. And it was quite a break because Burnham retaliated. He launched an investigation at GMC. Kwayana was earning 1 cent per year, meaning that he did not take a salary, but for tax purposes, because he was an executive chairman of GMC, he had to have a salary, so he agreed to a cent salary, right? And after they fell out, Burnham investigated him. His brother, TK, Terrence King, TK as we called him in the village, Burnham, the police moved against him, charged him for corruption. There was a campaign against Kwayana's wife, who was a Black American. Go back to your country, that kind of thing. A lot of Black Americans had come to Guyana through Kwayana, and they were living and working here. My Spanish teacher, Mamadou Lumumba, was a Black American. We had a sports teacher who was a Black American. There were a lot of Black Americans here. And in the conflict with Venezuela, these Black Americans, along with Black Guyanese, had set up communities on the border with Venezuela, because Kwayana had suggested to Burnham that you need to populate the frontiers of the border with Venezuela. And Burnham agreed. And so ASCRE members, in a lot of the Black Americans who had come, they set up these ujamas on the border with Venezuela. And Burnham and Kwayana got wrong. All those things broke up, and a lot of the Black Americans were deported. Some of them stayed, because some of them had become close to Burnham. Some of them had become close to Burnham. The majority of them who took Kwayana's side in the split, they were bailed out. It was a nasty breakup, very nasty breakup. They didn't speak. That was 1971. They didn't speak to each other for the next 14 years. Burnham died in 85. But when Burnham died, Kwayana told the WP, I am going to the funeral. I'm going to the funeral. And I remember my brother George, Wazir Mohammed, Rupert Rupnarain, we went with Guyana. Some of the others didn't go, but we went with Guyana to the funeral. And I remember when we walked into the cultural center, it was quite a story. Even the security didn't know what to do because they weren't expecting, you know, somebody like Guyana and WPA people to be there and so on. But even though they broke, Guyana was always respectful of Burnham. I remember when the WPA would go into certain villages, especially on West Bobis, you know, Guyana would take the lead and become the lead speaker because he understood those communities. And we, the young hotheads, we were abusing Burnham left, right, and center. And Guyana know you couldn't go in those West Bobis villages and abuse Burnham. So he would be the lead speaker. So he of tremendous character, you know, and tremendous influence on my life and so many other lives, and great contribution to our country. Everybody by now knows that he wrote the party song for the PPP. They still have that party song. Wrote the party song for the PNC. They still have that song, "Oh Fighting Men," and he wrote the party song for the WPA. You know, he edited New Nation. He was the most prolific writer in Thunder, which was the PPP paper. And then he became Askre had a newspaper, a new sheet called Askre Drums. He edited that. He edited They Clean, which was the WPS paper, and Open Word, which was another WPS paper. So wrote party song, edit newspapers, contributed to foreign policy to Africa, contributed to a lot of policy areas in the economy and so forth. Tremendous contribution, which matches both Burnham and Jagan. And I have read historians who have argued that Guyana made perhaps even more profound contribution than the two maximum leaders. You know, but his contributions are equal to theirs. But in a society like ours, you know, the two maximum leaders get the credit. It's like in the United States. A lot of people still say Kennedy was responsible for civil rights for blacks. No, it wasn't Kennedy. It was Lyndon Johnson who passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, not Kennedy. But Kennedy gets the credit because Kennedy was the more charismatic leader. Lyndon Johnson was a redneck from Texas. And so to envisage a Johnson helping to bring about civil rights for African Americans, it was not in the popular psyche. But I would argue that Guyana's contribution equaled those of the two maximum leaders.
Guyana's contribution equals those of the two maximum leaders. Like I was saying, it was argued that the falling out of Burnham and Body UC created what I would call problems to Buxton. It is why Buxton was quote unquote oppressed under the PNC. And never had a good relationship with PNC. As a matter of fact, some people argue that when Buxtonians asked Burnham for services, let's say, you'd say, go to your president, UC right? Let's talk about that, if there's any truth to that, and the role of UC, but UC in establishing what always is in the forefront of my mind, these small developmental groups in the community, so women and children and men and, you know, community groups that can foster growth among the people.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things about Guyana's practice is that he's always forming organizations. Always. Something happens. If Guyana were in Guyana today, he would be forming organizations for us to deal with this new petrol state. He would have been forming an organization for us to deal with this oppression by the PPP. He was an organization man, always forming organization. If an organization falls by the wayside, he forms another one. You know, always doing some development. In my time in Buxton, you know, we had Lessons Place, which you are a graduate of. And it was a time when education, you know, you had a high school, County High School, will become the Republic Cooperative High School. And when in 1976, education was nationalized, he had to close down his school. And he started to give lessons in his flat. He lived at the bottom house of his family house, at the bottom there. And he started to give lessons there. And my brother George, who was a school teacher, started to give lessons in our little house. And soon they didn't have space. And they approached a family who had an old rum shop. And the family agreed to give them the place to turn it into an afternoon school that became known as Lessons Place.
The family was the Spencers, right?
The Spencers, right. And then people like myself threw my lot in, and we began to teach. And we would teach 300, 400 children in the afternoon. The first batch will come at 3 o'clock. Then when they leave, another batch comes at 5 o'clock. And then the older students came at 7 o'clock. So we were servicing 300, 400 children per day. And the parents would say the children would feign illness during the day. And since 3 o'clock, meet in the afternoon, the sickness gone, because they're ready to come to Lessons Place. And we were able to, till up to today, I go back in the village and people are now big, you know, in their 50s and thing. And people would tell me about the difference those lessons made for them, you know. And it was Guyana's work. And then we formed a soup kitchen. He came one morning at about 3 o'clock. Bang, bang, bang. Yo, he used to come and knock at me and my brother George. We lived together. Yo, George, David. I said, God, what brother you see at this hour in the morning? He get up, he come, he sit down on the step. He said, I have $40 US here. And I've been thinking that children are coming home. It was during the period when there was shortage of foodstuff and people had to line up to get things and so on. So they didn't get home in the midday to prepare meals for the children. The children would come home midday and they got to go back without any food because the parents are in the line. And he said, I noticed this problem. And I have $40 here that somebody gave me as a gift. And I want us to start a soup kitchen where we prepare meals so the children can come at the midday when the parents are in line, and we prepare a hot meal for them. And he gave, I think either me or George, give one of us, I think give George the $40. And we came up with a plan that we will ask each working person in the village to contribute $1. And we started that soup kitchen. As you know, as a graduate of the soup kitchen, they used to call it
Baba Bowl.
Baba Bowl. Because one of the things Guyana insisted, let us not make the people feel that we are giving them something. So we charged them 25 cents. And we had the ladies came and they cooked Miss Garnish Dean. They would cook and prepare meals, and the children would come there at middays, come with their 25 cents. And they got, Miss Garnish Dean was a nutritionist. So she ensured that the food, you had a balanced diet and drinks and so on. And then when the children were gone, the older people, whatever food was left over, they will come with their 25 cents and get food. And that thing went on for almost a decade. Guyana is a genius. I have never met another human. His care and his concern for people. He started something called the Women's Development Window. Again, he got some money, somebody gave him money. And the Women's Development Window was like a little bank. The women would borrow money, start a business. And as the business flourished, they pay back the money. It was called the Women Development Window. Another of Guyana's thing. He started another thing. I'm forgetting the name now, but they would go and buy plantain and paprika, bring it back in the village and sell it. And, you know, people develop small businesses out of it. And all of this is in my time in the 80s, during the 1980s. These were all things. He was always pushing us to do something for people. To do something for people. He was always concerned about that.
Even in the 90s, I remember, because by that time I was part of the lessons program and so on, and Baba Bowl, I would say, died away, but then the problem of children and hunger and need still existed in the community to a large extent. One day, Brother UC turned to me and he said, you know, every evening I'm coming home, these children are stopping me to ask me for something to eat, etc., etc. Let's start a program. And that program was what I call the evening class, but afternoon lessons, evening class. You had to attend that class and you get dinner.
Yes.
I remember he partnered with, that might be Claymont Lai from the Beacon Foundation.
Yes,
I used to have to
yes.
go to Beacon Foundation to collect those supplies and manage them and distribute them to the children. Because by that time I was almost leading the lessons place program. So we had that night class where the youngsters would come, they would partake, they would get their teachings, and then they would take dinner and so on and so forth. Like you rightly said, always looking out for the, I would say, oppressed or the privileged in the community, trying to lift them up in some way or other. As somebody say, that's the measure of the man.
Yes,
That's
yes, yes. And village theater, you know, we were always doing drama. We were always teaching. We were always always doing something. Kwayana would go down to the WPA office early in the morning, and then he comes home in the afternoon to teach. And then leave and go back to the office, the WPA office, when he finished teaching. Or he would leave if he doesn't have to teach to come to funeral. That's where I got the funeral thing from. You know, that's where I don't miss funeral once I'm home. It's Guyana wake and funeral. He got me and George and them boy and so on. You know, we couldn't, when we upstairs singing, we couldn't drink in front of him because we didn't want him to see us drinking. He didn't drink, he didn't cuss. But the big men in the village used to talk to you and cuss. And he would say, yes, Jack, and say, well, Guyana is tolerant to these big people, and we can't drink, we can't cuss. So we couldn't drink. We used to take turn and go downstairs and take the tooks and come upstairs back. And then when we follow you home, and then go back to the wake, they used to tease us and say, are you daddy gone now? You can drink up. And years later in America, we decided we stop hiding and we drink in front of you. He said, I always knew you all drank. I didn't bother me.
I was waiting to say that a lot of things we thought, but you see, it wasn't aware. He was quite aware. But, you know, and I would say in his humility and not wanting to make you uncomfortable, he didn't even make you aware that he was aware of these things. Right?
Yeah.
It's 4 minutes to 9. This conversation can go on and on, I'm sure. What I will do is open up the lines, play some voice notes, and we'll chat as
we go along.
I want to play the first voice note I'm going to play. This is an interesting one.
It sounds like the PFC.
Let me play this voice note first, and then I'll take your calls.
It sounds like the PFC owns my cousin's children, Ras Kofi Yabu, Bako Reparation.
Sounds like Rebecca.
That y'all put it through. As a little girl going to Buxton, visited Buxton a lot, I saw it firsthand how he was treated. How the family themselves had to be silent about being related to UC Guyana because of word up.
So y'all owe my cousin's children reparations. PNC, you do.
Yes, interesting comment. Anything you want to say to that?
No. It was a sign of the times to quote one of Martin Carter's poems. You know, it was a sign of the times. And when you're in politics, Quina would say that. We'll tell you that. You know, it was part of the political ferment of the time. But yes, Quina contributed a lot to the PNC. But he and his followers took a lot of blows from the PNC once he and Burnham fell out. You know.
Call it live.
Morning to that. Morning, Dr. Evans.
Good morning.
What a wonderful conversation. Not a person we normally get. You, in fact, tell people how emotional I get publicly. But this year got me choking up, got balls going around my throat, all kind of thing. You know, it's like, yeah, this needs to be replayed, put in the halls of PNC and all of those ones who want to become leaders. This is a man, all I've been hearing you talking is about selflessness, not self-serving, loving, the love for people, the love for his people. He could have become the leader, but he dropped it and said, look, my people are more important than me and my aspirations. Kadaki, we go class when it's all of this conversation.
It's priceless, you know.
Yes, it is priceless. There is one other young fellow that I keep, when I listen to you, Dr. Hines, there's a next fellow that you wouldn't know him, Kadaki wouldn't know him, but I listen to this fellow whenever there is an interview on him. He's a 36-year-old fellow out of South Africa. If you have the chance, just go and research the Tantalaks. Just research him and listen to his story. Listen to him give his story how he's selfless. I was wondering if he's the child, if he's the son of UC Koyana. You know what I mean? Because when I listen to your story, you dictated and saying how, giving the autobiography of Dr. of UC, I'm hearing lots. This here need to be repeated. Actually, we want to hear this every goddamn week. Please, every week. Find some time of play. If you want people to pay for it, we gonna find ways to pay for it. Again, thanks, Dr. Hines. Kadaki, thanks for this move this morning.
Well, it's there. All you have to do is share it. You know, you just have to share it right. It is there. It's right on Camps TV. Just share it around.
I would like for you to put it properly with thumbnails, etc., so this could drop on YouTube and we could share it around better. Numbers, algorithms, and let it work. We need this. We need this to stay with us, our children, and our children's children. Thanks again.
Thank you for your call. We have more voice notes. Reparations. That's the talk nowadays. And so we have the PNC ever consider reparations for those people who they have harmed because of the falling out?
Well, no, reparations to the movement. I mean, the PNC and the WPA have mended fences, and together they were able to deliver government for us in the form of the coalition government. The APNU is the PNC and WPA. Don't worry with all the other talk you hear. It was the initiative, and let me say it very clearly. It was Clive Thomas, Rupert Roopnarine, and Robert Corbyn. Those are the three men. They're the architects of the APNU. You know, there were others who attended meetings. Lance Carberry on the PNC side, Basil Williams, to his credit. A lot of them in the PNC didn't believe in the APNU, you know. So very few of them. A lot of the meetings were kept at the WPA office. And on our side, along with Clive and Rupert, Desmond Trotman, Ogunse, and myself when I'm in the country, would be the delegation. We were the backup, you know. But the three architects of the APNU were the PNC, were Robert Corbyn, Clive Thomas and Rupert Rupnarine, they are responsible for that coalition government. I have never said it before, but I'm saying it now.
And for clarity, let me just inform that at the time, Rupert Rupnarine and Clive Thomas were the co-leaders of the WP.
Yes,
and
yes,
so for
yes,
those
yes.
who doubt the effectiveness of co-leadership, there is a good example of what co-leadership has achieved for us.
Yes, we didn't the leadership that took over from Corbyn did give WPA a bad hand, a bad deal for what we put in, in the formation of the APNU. For what we put in, the leadership that took over from Corbyn gave us a bad deal and treated us badly. At Corbyn being the leader, WPA would have been treated different, and the coalition would, I dare say, might have been in power till up to today. I have tremendous respect for Robert Corbyn, and it's someone who came up on the Burnham and was very harsh to the WPA in the bad old days. But at the time of the APNU, that man worked his butt off, you know, when the majority of the PNC executive did not believe the APNU was possible. What, WPA, them people, and so on, and Corbyn sat with Thomas and Rupnarine, and they stuck to it, and they delivered the APNU. Had there not be an APNU, the AFC would not have come over. AFC would not have joined PNC. AFC joined the APNU, and we got government in 2015, you know, and then the leadership that took over, you know, really treated us badly, terribly, terribly, terribly. And if Corbyn were in the leader, our history would have been different during that period.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you for holding your life.
Good morning, Dr. Hines. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister.
Dr. Hines, you made me cry this morning when you started talking. Dr. Hines, my mom always talked about Uncle Yussi Koyana. She always spoke very highly about him. And what you have said just erupt. Could you imagine if Mr. Burnham and Yussi Koyana had just give it a little more chance? Could you imagine what our country could have been when it comes to education? How it did for you guys and others. Could you imagine? But we just have to take a step backwards and look and see what is going on now. They wanted to take all of those things away from us, not pre-education. They want us to become dunce, illiterate, and go back, all the way back. No, we cannot. We have to move forward. And thank you very much for such an education this morning. Kadaki, thank you. Dr. Hines, thank you very much. Whenever you meet with Uncle, give him a big for me, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Oh my God. This is a good education for all of us, Guyanese and outside who are not Guyanese, who are listening this morning. This is, I think, Dr. Hines and Dr. Kadaki, please do more of this. Continue with it. Continue so we can learn more. This is powerful. This is way beyond. Because if you didn't talk about it, some of us would have never known all what he put in. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I remember, and I saw a comment here. I wanted to talk about this earlier, and then I saw the comment that reminded me. Even as the head of GMC, when there was what appeared to be a lot of wastage in terms of produce, but you see introduced into the communities, I know definitely Buxton, there was at least once or twice a week when a truck used to come around from GMC and sell what I came to know Scott provision.
Yes. It was in all the villages. He is a visionary of no mean order. And I'm tearing up. Yeah, I remember when I was coming to America, he came with me and my brother George to the airport. And he said, do not come back in this country without a degree. He said, when you have the complexion that you have, and you come from a village, and you're dark skinned and you come from a village, when the struggle is over, you know, Rhonda was hinting at it this morning. When the struggle is over, when the politics are over, the rich people will be all right. But they will only listen to you in this country if you have an education. Said, do not come back to this country without a degree. Kidaki, I made sure I had 2 degrees before I went back to Guyana. I didn't stop at a master's, of bachelor's. I went, and when I first finished my master's, I went back. I always heard that voice, that soft voice. He came with us to the airport. Said, do not come back to this country. When the struggle, when the politics are gone, nobody will listen to you if you're black and you come from a village, you know. And I heeded that advice.
Always a champion for education, you know. I mean, in recent times, you would have heard me greeted him. The last time we were on a three-way call, my greeting was "Como vai você?" I think. And
yes.
How did we get to that? When Body UC learned that I was studying Portuguese, because I went to the Center of Brazilian Studies as a young adult to learn Portuguese. When he learned that I was learning Portuguese, he actually joined me in learning Portuguese, right? He basically, once he learned he would come and he would ask me, you know, how you say this, how you do this, what this is, and so on. And Body UC brought back from the US a package I still have on my bookshelf, a cassette and a phrase book, Portuguese. He has always been, he always has encouraged us to go after education. And I don't know where I got that term from, but I always say to people, education is a black man's salvation, right? And that is the kind of attitude that Body UC has always exhibited.
He was fluent in Spanish, still is fluent in Spanish, fluent in Swahili. And I rather suspect that he is fluent also in French.
He did teach us Swahili. Swahili, yes.
Yes, there were five students from his school who did Swahili at GC and passed. And this I'm telling you in the 70s. In the 70s, those 5 girls, Jem Grant is one of them, and there were 4 others. And they passed GC in Swahili. Kwayana taught them. Kwayana and his wife Chaiko taught them Swahili. And they passed. In those days, you non-Africans didn't write Swahili. And they did. They did and passed.
Well, at 10 minutes past the 9 o'clock hour, note we're having an extended one, and it's worth every moment, every minute. I have some more voice notes to play. Let me get this one.
Good morning, Mr. Amsterdam and Dr. David Hines. Yes, a lot of people need Dr. David Hines to run. A lot of people need Kadaki around. But we, as people, we have been so beaten down, as the word that Dr. Hines normally says. You understand? And confused of who to trust. You understand? Because people that love the dust, or most people that love the dust that Ranger walk upon. And I can remember one of the Granger came to Olin Grove Center Ground and said when he get in there, he's going to come back and celebrate and thank the people of Olin Grove, which he never did. He said the same thing in Buxton. You think people in Buxton just start to draw PPP money just like that? But it's promises that Granger make, and even though a lot of people get upset You understand? And then in the 2020 election, what he have done, people lay down on the ground, kissing him. But for stand up and support him in the fight and the struggle, and he get behind the backs and stab us. You understand? So people are so confused who to trust, because you're telling me one thing in front of my face and behind my back is something else. So people are very skeptical. Yes, we are APNU, we are PNC, but we are confused, and a lot of people are confused. Who saying they're gonna stay away? Who saying they're not voting no more? Who saying they're on business? What comes to do? All these things.
Now, guys, this program is starting to sound like it has to be a 3-in-1. There could be never enough time to call your life.
Morning, Brother Kadaki.
Good morning, Colin.
Morning.
I think 1 or 2 quick points. In reference to the APNU, I'm not hearing you mentioning President David Granger if he was not instrumental in the forming of the APNU. And that's one. 2, you've spoken a lot on whether you see Guyana, but I would like you to say a quick word on one Brother Kwame Apata. Was he instrumental? Thank you.
All right, there are no more questions there. I think you can differentiate them, Dr. Hines.
Kwame Apata, I believe for
another program.
Yeah, Kwame was tremendously influential, very, very influential. The people of Denham can tell you that where we lived. In Buxton, he had a tremendous impact on me personally and the whole generation. He was an important Ascarian, an important organizer. One of the true disciples of Guyana. And on another program, I will talk more about Kwame Apata. No, Mr. Granger played no role in the formation of the APNU. No role. Mr. Granger came in after the APNU was formed, and Corbyn turned over the leadership of the party and the leadership of the APNU to him. Mr. Corbyn was the leader. Oscar Clark attended meetings. Lance Carberry attended meetings. Basil Williams attended meetings. There may be 1 or 2 others that I am missing, but that was it. The vast majority of them did not believe in the APNU, the idea of an APNU. It's Robert Corbyn and the others that I called there. Granger was not in the PNC at that time. He came in after it was formed.
Thank you. Call it live.
Good morning, Brother Kadaki and Dr. David. How are you? I'm just calling to wish our venerable elder, Brother UC Quine, a happy birthday, and to acknowledge the role he played in the formation of today's Guyana. You know, I cannot express it as eloquently as Dr. David, but I do know he has done a lot for us and continues to do a lot. And wish that this brother will have the blessings of our ancestors for some time more to come. Thank you very much. Good morning again.
Thank you much.
One of the things I forgot to mention, Kadaki, Yoruba singers. Guyana is influential in the formation of Yoruba singers. As Ratcliffe has said that over and over and over again. Guyana was a big influence on the formation of the Yoruba singers. I always forget whenever I'm writing something, and I just wrote something that is circulating right now on the internet, and I hope the newspapers will carry it tomorrow or whenever. And I always forget to mention his role in the formation of Yoruba singers.
Thank you. Caller, your life.
Good morning.
Good morning, caller.
Yeah, I would like to make my comment concerning with the two calls back and support Flash Gordon, his comment he made yesterday. I didn't get a chance to view the whole program today, but we cannot be talking about the PPP that they are undemocratic while the elites within the PNCR is sowing seeds of division and discontent. Nothing has changed from last Congress. I could recall last Congress, Bork said that he wants to see Roysdale Ford, Amanza, and Ganesh run the party. He said that, and I have never seen so much criticism within the party towards a leader as towards Aubrey Norton. Secondly, let's fast forward to the conference. They had a conference in Washington. Bork again came out and said he wants to see unity in the party. And he called on Granger, Harmon, and Williams to come together. Now with Roysdale Ford running, I see what that come together meant. Many of us are seeing it. It's disgraceful. I am yet to see the opposition leader on Bork's platform. It never happened. Now you fast forward to last week's press conference. You have Mark Benska is asking the most demeaning questions to Ganesh, asking Ganesh if what he thinks about the opposition leader. It's so disrespectful. It shows that there is a group of people on these podcasts, these platforms, which I said exception of Politics 101 and yourself, Cam's TV, who wants to narrative how the party runs. And they don't care about the masses. You have Norman Brown. He said he is responsible for Norton being the leader, which is far from the truth. The masses want Norton, and I am predicting here today, if Norton is not the leader going into next election, they're going to lose about 5 to 8 seats in Parliament, because people would be dissatisfied and people are watching from the outside. The masses are looking what's going on. Because for me, Roysdale Ford, he threw the petition. He took the die. Because even on Mark's show, Mark asked him repeatedly, what's going on with the petition, with the election petition? He always make a comment, he's working on it. And now you're going to file the petition late and try to give an explanation? You cannot be my leader. That's what I'm saying. You cannot be my leader.
Thank you, caller.
Thanks for taking my call. Thank you.
Let me do a little bit of editorializing here. Sometimes we have to choose how we manage our time and ventilate issues. I am saying this is one of the most inopportune time to have the discussion that this body is raising. I see a lot of, and that's the nature of the program, so you can't fight it too. A lot of side conversations taking place like U.S. politics and Obama and so on and so forth. But the focus of this morning's program, as you can pick up if you're following, really and truly, we're celebrating Brother UC, right? We're celebrating Brother UC. Not to say that we don't do this every day, right? On this program, so it might help if we because I personally am not going to spend any time talking about any other thing, and that's me being honest here, right? Voice note. This one is very low, so there's no point in playing it. I can't hear it, and I'm right here next to the phone. So, sorry for that. It's not me being discriminatory.
Good morning, Kadaki, and good morning, Dr. Hines. In terms of leader, let me just give you a simple example or analogy. It's like there was a big crowd on the street, and there was a patient at the center of this crowd, and everybody was trying to tend to this patient. And they cannot do nothing to help this patient that is lying there. And out of the blues, here comes a man. Take his two hands and bust through that crowd. Excuse me, please, excuse me, excuse me. And that man go into the crowd, and he went to that patient, you know, and he do what he's supposed to do. He did what he's supposed to do. And, you know, after he do what he's supposed to do, the patient was attended to, and the crowd cheer him and clap and cheer him and says, you know, this is the man. This is the man. Nobody called him. But he saw the need, and he went. And he put his skills to work. And he do what he was supposed to do. And even he himself did not know that he would be so much appreciated by the people because of what he did. So he did not take his skill and walk away and depend on somebody to call him. No. So that's an analogy, Mr. Hines. Thank you. Bye.
But it's not just speaking parables. Dr. Hines, I know you get a message.
No, I understand, Cliff.
Yeah, I know you get a message.
I understand what you said.
Unless you want to respond to that or anything.
No. When it comes to that, I'm listening.
One of the things we have not talked about, what do you see? And that is, I think, very, 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 very important in the eyes of Buxtonians especially. Buxton had two major production facilities. One was what we call a plastic factory.
The garment factory.
And the garment factory. I understand that the garment factory in particular was started by women with sewing machines in their homes.
Yes, and Guyana was behind that too.
Talk to us about that. You might have a deeper sense of.
No, you said it there. You said it there. That garment factory was a co-op. And the plastic factory too.
The Guyana Garment Manufacturers Co-op, I think, is the right name.
Yes, and Guyana was behind that, those initiatives. There's so much that, you know, I forget them when I'm speaking off the cuff. So much at the left of the village. You know, sometimes I pay more attention to his national contributions and downplay his contributions in the village, but they're enormous. Yes, he was the moving spirit behind the.
Was he not also village chairman?
Yes, way back he started. He and Martin Stevenson. They used to call them the two boys in short pants because they were young boys. So he was chairman of the village, deputy chairman of the village council. And there's nobody who know that back then. And the other day when he asked me about water not being in Company Trench, and I called you and we were on the three-way, you hear how he was telling you about the back dam?
Yes.
He knows the back dam.
As if he was standing right there.
Oh, yes.
I see Jill Ike, I want to believe this is his name. Kadaki, please stop attacking PNC. I don't know I'm attacking PNC. Yeah, I know the ones bleeding in the nation. Dry. This is a time for united efforts. Well, if there is anybody who can accuse me of attacking the PNC and trying to cause division, somebody has to be blind here. I can't say it any other way. I don't know that I'm doing that. I don't know that I am doing that. And in the same, we were talking about how Buxton as a community perhaps suffered because of the falling between Body UC and Bonham. The garment factory was handed over to the GPC for management. I don't know if you know that whole story there.
Yes.
And really, really suffered to the point of becoming dysfunctional. And even after, I think, when the PNC left office, but you see, tried valiantly to get the PPP to honor some commitments that the government had made when they had taken the garment factory under management. And to date, as far as I know, we have been unable to successfully get the government to what should I say, honor its commitments, compensate the cooperators, and allow the garment factory to flourish like it would have in previous years. Do you have any information, any history you can share?
No, not beyond what you just said. You know.
Okay. Good. It's 2 minutes. 28 minutes past 9 o'clock. Oh, I think we have to go. Dr. Hines, in closing, anything you want to say? And when can we talk about Kwame Apata? Because Kwame Apata has been at least well known in Buxton, Buxton friendship. I know he had gone away to Guyana or Suriname to live.
Yeah, before that he lived in the Namstel. He's well known there on the West Coast. Okay. He was the Ascre man on the West Coast. He lived for years in the Namstel, and he taught at West Demerara Secondary School there in Port Ryan. So he's well known there. Next week when I come, we'll talk a little bit more about others in Ascre who played very important roles. But it's good to remember, somebody remembered Kwame. Yeah.
Good. So,
yeah, go ahead.
When do we talk about him? We leave that for next week?
Yes, we'll talk about that next week.
Good. Tomorrow's Free Talk Friday, so you can tune in to me tomorrow, and all of those other side issues that people want to raise and discuss, we can talk about them tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm very happy that you joined this morning's broadcast. I'm really, really happy that Dr. Hines encouraged me to take up the challenge of doing a back-to-back program, talking about not only geopolitics, but local politics in this sense of contributions from both the UC and so on. Thank you very much for joining me. Join Dr. Hines tonight for Politics 101.
Yes, and we'll continue the conversation on, I'm doing a special on Brother UC.
Good. Your closing remarks.
Well, gosh, we have said so much this morning. It would be a scraven if I do closing remarks. Just to say thanks to you and thanks to the audience for staying the course. And I'm really honored to contribute and to fill in some gaps in our history and to locate Brother UC where he ought to be located. You know, a former PPP minister wrote a book and he waxed lyric about Jagan. And somebody asked him, but man, you said nothing about Guyana. And he said, that's not his job. That's David Hines' work to talk about Guyana. And I took that very seriously. It is my job, it is our job to put Guyana where he belongs in the national consciousness. And I'm dedicated to doing that. I'm dedicated.
I know I said I'm allowing you to go now, but two things have been said which you perhaps need to respond to before you leave. A monument to Guyana in a Museum of African History somewhere in the Durban Park area is in order. When the right strong black leader comes to office, a monument to Guyana. How many times have there been approaches to honor what do you see Guyana national?
Well, they offered him a national award and he turned it down. He said he doesn't take those things while he's alive.
Who's they?
Right. But he's that you know, his humility is out of this world, and you know, he told them no. I think he gives us more leeway to do things in his name. We have our annual emancipation symposium in his name. And he normally would resist those things. But I think I can hear him say that, you know, we have stayed the course with him. And he gives us some leeway to lift him up. He is not the kind of person who likes to be. He would not be comfortable with this. What we did here this morning, but coming from us, he would not fight it. He would not fight it. And so yes, and that is why we want to be in government, because a tribute to Guyana in the form of a monument can only be pushed by people like us. I mean, you can't expect others who are not au fait with Guyana's contribution to push it. And that is why we want to be in government. That is why I was a little bit uncomfortable with the conversation going this morning, that if somebody like myself is not the top leader, that I don't want to be a leader. No, I want to be in government. That's why we're part of the struggle. We want to be in government because there are things that we are best placed to deliver. You see? Cash transfer. Taking 10% of the income and giving it by law to the people. It's we who have to push that. And we are better placed to push it when we are in government. So I want to be in government. We want to be in government. That's why I was a little bit uncomfortable with the concentration on top leader and all, number one leader. No, we want to be part of the mix. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And we don't have to be the top leader to be part of the mix. I am not about to split the opposition vote. I am not into that. I am not into that. There's a time and place for everything. And this is not the time to split the opposition vote.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. The 26 minutes till the 10 o'clock. Oh, God, we really got to go. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Day. Remember, tomorrow is Squirrel Friday at Club Twilight Restaurant, Bar and Lunch. Those of you who would normally place your orders, please do. Place your orders from today. Tomorrow we are going to do some chicken fried rice. Yeah, it's long winged. Well, I don't think we have ever done chicken fried rice for you as part of the Creole Fridays. And so tomorrow at Club Twilight, you're going to get chicken fried rice. If you're vegetarian, you can also partake, because the chicken is not going to be mixed in your fried rice, at least not all of the fried rice. So we're catering for vegetarians too. Right? Call me 6225933, make your order, and we can take care of that. Everything else that has to be said will have to be said tomorrow. Yeah, this has been a long one. Enjoyable, but exhaustive still. Right? Have a good one. Goodbye. I will check on that road to see how it was patched, if it was neatly done. And some of you can find out for me. Miranda Brown, you could find out for me whether or not the road was patched only because them bourgeois, they zinging and zinging up and down the East Coast Road. Or if it was patched because I said that Big Ol' Ejil needs to do something about it. Y'all have a good day. Goodbye. Much love. Peace. Bye-bye. Tonight is karaoke night at Club Twilight. Yeah, I forgot to tell you that. That's important. Come on down. Let's sing some karaoke. Let's have some fun. Spread the word and bring your crew.